Before you get started on your rough drafts today, I want to make sure you're squared away with the 4 dialogue rules that we need to keep in mind when writing. And so I'm going to walk you through these. They're also posted on the wall so you can reference while writing, but I want to make sure that we talk through these together so that there's no confusion once you start writing. So the first rule is simple. It's P before Q, which stands for punctuation, before quotations. So anytime you incorporate quotation marks in dialogue when somebody's speaking, you need to make sure that your punctuation comes first. So if I said, Mrs. Linkman says, oh dear, comma, quotation. So punctuation before quotations. Miss Fieldfend is my best friend, punctuation before quotations. So anytime you have quotation marks, you need to make sure that your punctuation comes before the quotation. So P before Q. The second rule is that you always capitalize the first word of dialogue. So in this example, Miss Fieldson needs to be capitalized because it's the first word that comes in the spoken word. So anytime you have a quotation, the first word is always capitalized. The second rule is a little bit of a variation of this rule. So if you have a split quote, you do not capitalize the second half of the quote. So a split quote would be if I said, I don't know what I would do, punctuation before quotation, and then I split this quote with a signal phrase. Mrs. Flinkman said, punctuation before quotation, without Miss Fieldson every day. So I took this one sentence, I don't know what I would do without Miss Fieldson every day, and I split it with my signal phrase. And so because it's still all one sentence, I don't need to capitalize this second W because it's not starting a new sentence. The exception would be here unless you start a new sentence. So if I said, I don't know what I would do without, if I kept all of this first, without Miss Fieldson, oops, Miss Flinkman said, period, she's the best. So because I started a new sentence here and I didn't split up this sentence, I would still capitalize the she. Okay? And then the fourth rule, I think you already know this rule, but the fourth rule is when changing speakers, so if you have a conversation with 2 people speaking, when you change speakers, you indent and start a new line. So, teaching with you is the best, I said. And then Miss Fieldson nodded. Ooh. Totally, she replied. So anytime a new person speaks, so if I spoke this time, and even though I just said one thing, since Miss Fieldson said the next thing, I start a new line and I indent on my new line. So be very mindful of that. So what I'd like to do now is move sort of forward from these dialogue rules, and I want to show you how I would go about taking dialogue and putting it into practice in the beginning of a short story. So I'm just going to start typing, and I'm going to introduce 2 characters of a short story. And I'm hoping that this will do 2 things. That one, it will show you that you can start stories with dialogue, that you don't always have to start stories by saying it was a cold November day in the middle of the city. But you can start with dialogue. And then the other thing that I want to show you is how powerful dialogue is in helping us learn about characters. And so anytime you hear that phrase, show, not tell, Dialogue is a great way to do that. And so I want to introduce a story about two brothers. So if I'm typing my rough draft here, I want to introduce a story about two brothers who are going to sort of go on an adventure together. I don't need to introduce the adventure yet. I just really need to introduce these two characters. And so I'm going to start with the youngest one speaking to the oldest one. And so the youngest brother is going to say, "Hey, wait up, Carter. You're moving too fast." Punctuation before quotation. Actually, punctuation before quotation. Tyler hollered. I suppose I need an indent here, so I'm going to indent my line. I'm going to indent because now Carter's going to respond. "I wish you could move faster than that, Ty." I'm going to just split quote here. Carter, I'm going to use the word to describe Carter. Carter snapped. "You are like the slowest person on the face of the planet. Seriously. Period before quotation." Tyler hung his head. New line, because I have a new person now. Now, even though Tyler's not speaking yet, I'm going back to Tyler. So I need to start a new line. Tyler hung his head. "Just like he did every time Carter teased him for being slow. I'll try to do better," he said. "I'm sorry." "Whatever," Carter replied. I suppose I should be there. "Whatever. Just keep moving. I see the tree up ahead." So what I've done here is I've sort of introduced just two characters in this many words. And nothing has really happened yet. I know that you know now that I'm moving towards a tree and that this tree is probably going to bring something for these boys. But what I really wanted you to see through my dialogue is that Carter is kind of a bossy big brother and who kind of teases Ty for not being able to keep up. And with Ty, what I wanted you to see is that he looks up to Carter because he hangs his head in response to Carter teasing him, but that he doesn't retaliate against Carter. He just wants to please Carter, so he says, "I'll try to do better. I'm really sorry." So we have this relationship already created where Carter's clearly in charge. He's not very kind, and Ty sort of gets bullied around by his big brother, but takes it because he wants to please his big brother. So in just this very short conversation with dialogue, I taught you a lot about these characters without really having to say that Tyler wanted to be like his brother. I showed you based on the way that he spoke and based on his body language in response to Carter. And so keep that in mind, that we're not just asking you to use dialogue just because we want you to use dialogue. We're asking you to use dialogue because we recognize how powerful a tool dialogue is in getting to know characters and what makes them tick and what makes them who they are. So I hope this is helpful in you getting started on your rough drafts. These rules are posted on the wall, the dialogue rules, so reference them and think about how can I let my reader know more about my characters based on the things that they say.